This is Dr. Clayton from Clayton Hypnosis Clinic. Welcome to episode 13 of Hypnosis Chat. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you Dale Horton, who is an instructor of physics at Tidewater Community College. Thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me.
And, one thing that's interesting, I believe we just finished finals, right?
Yes.
Just finished finals.
Summer finals.
Okay,
yeah.
Summer finals. It's interesting because everyone has been a student at some point. But very few people get to be teachers. So it's interesting when you talk about finals. Normally people are talking about it from a student's perspective. Oh, the finals were hard. Instructor Horton was terrible this semester
Yeah.
or whatever. But rarely do we get the chance to see it from the teacher's point of view. So how did finals go?
They went pretty much okay.
Mm-hmm.
So from the teacher's perspective, what that means is students did on the final pretty much what they did throughout the rest of the class.
Okay.
So to a professor, that's a successful final.
Okay, good. So let's see. So was it kind of a normal bell curve?
Not for this class. It was a summer class, so a lot of my students were very well motivated. So
We're not well motivated.
They were
motivated because they have to sign up for summer school.
That's right.
Keep going here. I'm gonna be right
Yeah,
back.
so I got an equal numbers of A's, B's, and C's. So it was more oriented towards the high end, and only one person actually flunked the class.
Okay, so one person failed. What were there? Let's see. What were the problems like with the people that didn't do as well?
A lot of it has to do with things like motivation.
Okay.
So I had one student, for example, it's a summer class that we teach in 6 weeks, and he missed the entire first week of class.
Oh, and how many classes a week is it?
We have 3 classes a week.
Okay, so missed the first 3 classes.
Right,
Okay.
so he missed like 20% of the class.
Wow, okay, so there's only 5 weeks.
5-6 weeks, yeah.
5 or 6 weeks to the class.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and why did he miss? Did he give you a good reason?
Because he didn't realize the class was starting at that date.
Okay, all right, well, okay, so was he the one that failed?
He was.
Okay, well, we immediately see a correlation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so, and did he attend the other classes?
He did. He
okay,
did.
That's good.
And he actually tried, and he was, unlike a lot of failing students, he was actually involved in the class somewhat.
Oh, okay.
But he just put himself too far behind to ever recover from, really, is what ended up happening.
Gotcha. And so when you say involved, you mean participating in discussions?
Yeah, he would ask questions and things like that sort.
Okay.
He struggled a lot because he didn't know the material very well, but there was some effort there.
So would you say that there's a correlation between involvement in the class and higher grades?
Usually there is. So I said he was involved. The problem he probably had was focus.
Focus, okay. And
so it's not like he wasn't willing to come to class. He didn't bother to check his schedule, and he didn't realize that it started on that date and things of that sort. So he had that same kind of attitude towards homework and quizzes and things.
So he wouldn't do them, or
he would do them, but he wouldn't prepare for them.
I see. Okay, like kind of minimal.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So how do you, as a teacher, of course we think about that sort of thing from a student's point of view, but as a teacher, how do you think about that? How do you address that?
So the first thing you think about when you have a problem like that is you try to think about what is going to get this student to do the things that they need to do to be successful, and to then try and make it that clear to the student.
Okay, so that's interesting, and it might be surprising to a lot of people. It probably wouldn't be to you, but to a lot of people, it might be surprising that the teacher's first instinct is, how do I help that student do better?
That's what every teacher wants. Every teacher wants to give out A's. If every student got an A in my class, I would definitely give them all A's.
Okay, great. So there's no,
I don't use a curve or anything like that. No.
Yeah, gotcha.
I try to calibrate things so that people who do well get A's.
Okay, good. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone would do anything different. Like, well, you did really well, but everyone did a little better, so I'll give you a C.
Yeah, what usually happens in physics is the opposite. They make the test so hard that the highest grade in the class is like a 50. And so if you got a 50 or a 49 or a 48, you have an A. And if you have 47, you have a B. It's kind of,
that's kind of silly also.
Yes, it's the opposite issue.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, so let's see. So how would you, so this person, didn't make it this time, but generally when someone is not focused, how would you address that? How is that addressed usually?
Usually I try to bring them aside. I have fortunate that I have a lab section. So we have a little bit more one-on-one time than we do in other classes. So, maybe during lab while we're going over something and it's clear they're not getting something, I pull them aside and say, hey, I think you're struggling here, and I think this is why you're struggling. And sometimes students are open to that and sometimes not. It depends on my comfort level with the student a lot.
Depends on your comfort level?
My comfort level with the student. Yeah, how much of a rapport we have together,
I see.
As to, what they're comfortable discussing and not discussing.
Well, you would think that if it's physics,
yes,
you'd be the main person
if we're discussing physics, but a lot of times the issues that they're having have nothing to do with physics or the classroom
relationships
at all.
Or
that's right. Things that are going on outside the classroom are oftentimes the main factor in what people.
And so, would you talk to them about that?
If they're comfortable with it.
Okay.
I would try to keep it neutral. Like, you need to be spending more time working in class. You need to be studying more. You need to be doing the homework more, depending on whatever I'm seeing from that student. And then, if the student's comfortable with me, they'll probably give me a reason as to why they're not doing the homework, for example, or a reason why they weren't ready for the quiz.
Okay.
And then I could build off of that.
Okay. So, well, let's say, I just broke up with my boyfriend or whatever. How would you address that?
That is difficult to address. And, because I'm not a psychologist, I don't work in that area. Physics is my area, where my comfort zone. But you try and just let them know that you understand. That's always a good place to start from. I used to work in tech support. And one thing we learned in tech support is it's not you versus the customer. It's you and the customer versus the problem.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is try to approach it the same way. Okay, you're having trouble with your relationships right now. Why don't I give you, a couple extra days to make up the homework? Okay, or maybe you're not ready for the quiz, for the exam right now. So, I'll let you take it on Friday instead of on Wednesday, for example.
Okay.
And so give them a little bit of flexibility. Usually that, they're very appreciative of that. And that motivates them to,
So what percentage of the time does that make them try harder? 50%, 75%?
Probably 50%.
Really? So 50% they still don't try harder after that?
Well, try and succeed are different things, I guess.
Okay. So maybe 75% try, 50% succeed?
Exactly.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. All right. So interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that insight.
Yeah, no problem.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, related to, you can imagine someone juggling school, work, relationships, maybe health issues. And there's one of the key things I like to talk about in this show that I think is critically important is we learn from a very young age that our communication and later presentation of information to the outside world is very important. And however, we don't, in our society anyway, we don't teach that level of communication is important to yourself also, how you talk to yourself. On the very basic level, people, very frequently say, oh, I'm such an idiot, or things like that, which we would never say that. Can you imagine, if you saw someone saying that to their kid?
Right. Like, people are much harder on themselves than they are on other people.
Right. And the problem is we are still, it's not, you're not just talking to yourself, you're presenting to your unconscious mind in the same way that when you are talking to a child or a pet or an employee, you are giving a presentation to that employee, and you want, you could take the same information and based on how you present it, it could be completely worthless to them or even counterproductive, or it can be the best thing ever. So, if Instructor Horton said, I don't care about your stupid boyfriend, that would not be productive.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so, and we know that about the outside world, but then we do that to ourselves all the time. So one of the most important things we can learn is that your communication with yourself is just as important as your communication with the outside world. So one of the things, another way of thinking about that is if you're in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or any kind of relationship, one of the things that you learn is that coming to agreement is often more important than the thing that you agree on, than coming to conclusion A, B, or C. It's more important that you work as a team and be able to, agree on a conclusion rather than that you come to any particular conclusion. Right. And so, I think people who are successfully married would agree it's important to work as a team and come together and come to a decision together rather than trying to make the other person come to a particular decision. But we do that. You would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I would completely agree.
So, but again, we do the opposite of that all the time to ourselves. If we've got something from the outside world, like let's say we're dealing with 4 things, and then Instructor Horton gives me a really hard physics assignment, and I just say, no, you just have to do it. Oh, but 1, 2, 3. No, I'm not going to listen to that. You just have to do it now. It may or may not get done. It probably won't get done. And that's not the most efficient way or the most effective way to handle that. So when you are communicating with yourself, just as you probably wouldn't say that to someone else, like if your friend says, oh, I can't do my homework because my boyfriend just broke up with me or whatever, you probably wouldn't say, just do your homework.
Right.
Like we do to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have to come to a rapport and
people
agree on decision.
Almost prioritize other people over themselves.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that is a recurring theme of the kind of things that we talk about on here, mm-hmm. that we prioritize other people. And here's the thing. When you prioritize other people, you hurt everyone. You hurt yourself, you hurt the other people. Instructor Horton doesn't want you to get a D in his class. And when you prioritize yourself and make sure that you are doing things effectively, then he's going to benefit, you're going to benefit, everyone around you is going to benefit. Right. So let's talk about some examples then. Let's just say, for example, let's take studying first, since we've kind of been talking about that. So, okay, so I've got this thing to study. I've got these other things in my mind. And let's say I have to read a chapter by tomorrow. But I think about that, and I just can't even wrap my mind around doing a whole chapter because I've got all these other things in my mind. Rather than trying to force yourself to do something, 90% of the time, that's not going to be the best thing to do. I might say, okay, well, I'll read one section. And then it seems more doable to your mind. And then you start
once you get started.
Right. And then once you get started, you're in the zone, you're warmed up. 3/4 of those variables you were thinking about, like getting started, sitting mm-hmm. down, getting into the right mode, getting your brain warmed up, are already taken care of. So then it doesn't seem as big of a deal to do 2 sections or even the whole chapter. So once you're in it, once you're in the zone, it's much easier. So what did we do? We said, okay, it's like judo, where if you don't want to force against force, you want to come to an agreement in some way. So, okay, talking to your mind, okay, so what can we do? We need to get this work done. How do we want to do this? What's the best way to do it? It's the same rules that we would use in negotiating. If you're negotiating something, then you're certainly not going to tell the other team, okay, well, no, you just have to do this.
Yeah.
That would be the opposite of negotiating.
Right.
So when you're negotiating, you would say, okay, well, all right, well, we want this, you want this. What can we do to make this a win-win situation? Can we do a little bit of this and a little bit of that? And the bottom line is, any solution that you come up with using that process will be better than any solution you come up with using an antagonistic process. Mm. So that'd be an example. So what other examples would there be of something like that, of coming to an agreement with yourself?
Coming to an agreement with yourself.
Like I got one in mind, like working out, for example.
Oh yeah.
That's something that, a lot of people, and this is something that I've talked a lot about before. I've put a lot of thought into this. And if you imagine working out and you don't want to do it, it's not because you don't want to work out. It's because you're not warmed up for it yet. You're not into it yet. So like right now, if I thought about just running, mm-hmm. I don't really want to do that because I'm not ready for that.
Right.
So, but I could get up and stretch. That's no problem.
Mm-hmm.
My brain has no problem with that. And the reason I has a problem with running is because I'm not ready to run yet. That's not something I can do efficiently right now. I'd have to warm up first. So, and then once I'm warming up, it would be okay to walk. Walking would be fine.
Right.
And then once I'm walking, for a couple minutes. Jogging would probably be fine.
Sure.
So you're taking these little steps where you're ready for the next step. So if you're
right.
So this is just really one application of this idea of good communication with yourself, where and it's not creating tension. It's not creating. A lot of times, if you really have conflict with yourself and try to make yourself do something, that's why most lack of motivation and lack of focus happens.
A good example of negotiating with yourself, using the same example of working out, is you might say, for example, you're running on the treadmill, but you're going to watch TV at the same time.
Right. So that is a good example.
Yeah. So
and another example might be you think about running and you don't really want to, but you wouldn't mind doing strength training or yoga, or just going out and stretching. And then your brain's okay with that and you're in agreement. So you actually do it and you feel good about it. So you're actually doing something as opposed to not doing something, which happens a lot of times if you're in conflict. Number two, you're going out there and you're getting warmed up, which makes it much easier to transition into something else. And number three, and most subtly and most importantly, you're developing that relationship with yourself where you're getting used to effective communication so that next time that happens, your brain remembers, oh yeah, well, we can come to an agreement on that and then we can do it. And then suddenly you're motivated to work out or do whatever because you have a good relationship with your unconscious. It's a very intangible kind of concept.
I don't think a lot of people think about their unconscious. I know I don't very often. And about that. So.
Yep. And your unconscious is basically all the automatic thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you have, all the programs that you have installed in yourself over the years. So for example, if you on the physical level, if you walk into the room and flip the light switch on without even thinking about it, that's an unconscious behavior. If you, let's just say that I really like Game of Thrones. And if I, think about Game of Thrones coming on tonight and I get a good feeling about that, that is a programmed feeling. And thoughts might be like if I'm in Dale's class and I think Dale's just a really hard instructor and blah, blah, blah. That's an automatic thought I might have.
Right.
So, so we have all those things are your unconscious. Your unconscious generally is not good at initiating new thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It's really good at responding with thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you've already established.
Right.
So it's happy to do things. You just have to work with it. And it's really...
I see that a lot in physics when I teach physics because a lot of students come in dreading physics. And I hear a lot of comments like, oh, I'm not smart enough to learn physics, or I'm not good at physics and stuff like that. And I'm like, you're not good at it because you haven't done it. That brings me something up. This is really interesting. This is not what today was going to be about, but I find this is one of the most interesting things, I think. I think that like when you see someone who's good at physics, for example, you think, oh, they just have a skill or they just have an ability that I don't have. It came naturally. It came through work.
Right. It came through work. And more specifically, everything, physics and everything else is just a series of steps. It's just like, for example, if I look at a mechanic, my first thought is just kind of, oh, he's just good at mechanics. And he just does magical mechanics stuff.
He just woke up one day and knew how to disassemble a car.
Yeah, or it's just an ambiguous skill. It's just a skill.
Yeah.
But really, it's not a skill. In his head, it's a series of lists. Oh, okay, so there is a problem. What is the problem? Okay, that's in this category. Okay, what are the questions I have to ask? Okay, it's this answer. I need to go to this category. And that is everything. That's everything. Every single skill from making an omelet to doing hypnotherapy, to learning physics, you would agree with that, right? So it's like if Instructor Horton thinks about a physics problem, he doesn't just know the answer intuitively.
Right. In fact, that's what I try to teach my students. It's not about knowing the answer. It's about knowing the steps to get to the answer.
And everything is like that. Every single skill that there is, even things that seem like they're not technical, like maybe art, like someone's art painting style, that is just a series of steps also.
Artists have to do a lot of work and a lot of practice, and they put a lot of time and effort to make it look effortless.
Yeah. And when they're doing it, like, I used to watch Bob Ross. I love Bob Ross, don't you?
Yeah.
So always used to watch him in the afternoons. And I'm sure that if we sat down and really interviewed him about how he was thinking, it would be, okay, we need steps. Okay, I'm going to do a mountain scene. We start with the sky. He always started with the sky.
Yeah.
I'm going to, you know, and then I'm going to
Absolutely.
use this kind of brush. And so step one is using this brush, using this much paint, brushing it off in this way. It's just a series of steps.
Right. In fact, if you watch his shows, they're laid out exactly like that. In teaching, we call it modeling. You're trying you're vocalizing what you're thinking while you're doing it so that people can see how to do it themselves.
Right, exactly. And the more you know about how the person is thinking and how their thoughts lead to feelings and leads to behaviors, then that's how they do it. That is the skill. Right. So the skill is a series of steps they learned over time. And if you can understand how they're thinking about it, and modeling is, I'm very familiar with that. It's a big term in NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, which is closely interrelated with hypnosis.
Right.
And the more you know about how they're thinking, feeling, and behaving, the more you can duplicate that behavior. Right. And you can duplicate a behavior very efficiently compared to just kind of learning it through trial and error. So anyway, so that's the thing. So you never again do you have to be intimidated by any kind of skill, or more importantly, think that you cannot acquire any kind of skill, because whatever that skill is, it's just a series of steps, just like making a sandwich or doing anything else. There's just more steps to it, and you just remember them and you just kind of put them in order, and the more efficiently you can categorize that steps, then you can do that. And, you know, a lot of people, they'll be like on the liberal arts side and they'll say, I'm not good at math. And really all they mean is, with like a liberal arts thing, there's a lot of the steps are overlapping. So for example, if I learn Spanish, then I go to learn German, they're completely different languages, but the steps of learning a language, so it's really 75% the same, because most of it's just learning another language, even if they're completely different languages. But then they're like, oh, I'm not good at math. All that means is that there's less overlapping steps.
Right. It's more sequential.
Yeah. It's not, so I guess the thing I really want to get across is, it's not your type of brain. It's not like your type of brain isn't good at math. It's just that there's different steps, like steps you haven't learned yet, as opposed to steps on whatever you're used to, where you can go to a similar field where 75% of the steps are the same. They're still just steps. Like one step in art is just as easy or hard as one step in math.
Right.
So it's just, there's just different steps. So you can do literally anything that anybody else can do. All you have to do is learn the steps.
Right.
Okay. So you would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay. All right, great. Okay. Well, that is about all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation. So I will look forward to seeing everyone next week on Hypnosis Chat. Thanks.